I'm going to jump in with a question real quick. In the headlines a lot recently, we have been hearing about people finally coming forward with reports of sexual assault, sexual harassment by employers. How will you as a mayor not only set the tone, but set an environment where A, those things don't happen, and unfortunately when they do, that the victims feel safe coming forward immediately rather than hiding in silence because it's not being believed?
Well, this is something that fortunately I was able to work on in the auditor's office. And what we discovered, we did an audit of all the untested rape kits around our state. And what you mentioned speaks to a number of these issues. And look, the reality is for the last 10 years at the city and at the state, no one would actually even go in there and count the number of untested rape kits. We had to force that. I had to walk in there and threaten subpoena power in our own crime lab in Albuquerque to personally go in there and count the number of kits. And when we did that, we realized that there were 4,000 untested rape kits in Albuquerque. 4,000. And they're as old as 30 years old. And about 25% of them are minors. Now, I want to give the city credit for not destroying that evidence, because I think in rural communities, we saw them destroy it. But no one would own up to this until we did this audit. And we have pushed the gas pedal down on trying to solve the rape kit backlog as fast as we can and as good as we can. And the amazing thing about that is after all that effort, we see the state of New Mexico, Governor Martinez, her Secretary of Public Safety, committing to ending that rape kit backlog by the end of their term and funding it appropriately, stepping up with leadership. Yet at Albuquerque, we just now, 2 years later, got grants to process 30% of the backlog. There is still no plan to end the backlog. There has been no one to step up and actually say, you know what, instead of these capital projects, we are going to process the backlog. It's another example of how our priorities are not what they should be. And the reason why this is so important is because what you mentioned was also a finding in that audit. The reason why, historically, we have not processed these is, number one, leaders have not taken it seriously and funded it seriously. But number two, we don't believe women and children. And often in New Mexico, this is also related actually to family relationships. And so there's a lot of difficult nuances with respect to that. But law enforcement cannot do that. And I will make sure we process every kit and we take as evidence every report that comes our way.
I appreciate the state auditor's attention on this. I think Tim's done some good work on this over the last year. And I'm glad that we finally got a really good grant to be able to ensure that we process the backlog of the assault kits. And so people need justice. We need to make sure that every person in the city has the justice that they deserve. And so we got to work hard to make sure that backlog is gone. But one of the these are issues and challenges, and there's real solutions to it. And one of them is the fact that in the city of Albuquerque, and by the way, part of those we depend also on the state, on the crime labs to be able to help us process those. But we found that in the city of Albuquerque, we just did not have the qualified technicians that would be able to do that. So I was glad to be able to put together a bill and really encourage the a partnership with CNM and UNM to be able to get people on a fast track, to be able to go through and get qualified, get the degree that they need, the certification that they need to be able to handle, to be trained and have the experience and the certification to be able to process that backlog too. So these are really challenging decisions, and it's going to take good leadership to ensure that justice is served, because that's really what it's about, is that justice is served and people are given that kind of justice. I tell you, our records are very different. Tim and I have very different records when it comes to putting the people of this city before criminals. There is one bill. There's one bill that I have a hard time even imagining that someone would vote on this bill. But Tim voted on this bill. It's HB 184, I guess, or SB 184, and it's a bill that tells the city of Albuquerque, basically limits the city of Albuquerque from being able to put limits on where sex offenders can live. And Tim decided that it was better for Santa Fe, to decide, rather than cities like Albuquerque to decide where sex offenders could live. It's actually absolutely dangerous. It was a dangerous bill, and it's downright disgusting that he voted on it. But he voted in favor. I got the bill right here. It's a 2-page bill. SB 184, Tim voted in favor of it. And it basically said Santa Fe should decide that, not Albuquerque.
Well, I like responding to this, and you can take a look at the bill. It's really straightforward. That bill was about statewide standards. So we said that we didn't want cities having monitoring and parole regulations that were different, because we need statewide standards to actually enforce it. And the amazing thing is that's actually the law now. I was proud to pass the toughest sex offender legislation in the country, and I even did that with our governor, and it includes this law right here. And so to say what you said, Dan, is it's just wrong. And also to imply somehow that anyone, you or I, would want to encourage sex offenders is, I think, totally inappropriate. Thank you. And then I want to say one other thing. Priorities do matter, and it's any city councilor. If we could have ended the rape kit backlog with half of every city councilor's capital outlay any time in the last 8 years, and that goes for legislators too. If I would have known about the rape kit backlog, I would have given my own capital outlay to it. So all of these are about priorities, and it's time we prioritize the rape kit backlog.
Did you want more, Tim?
Yeah, sure.
And then I saw the hand. Okay, next.
I mean, to what Tim's talking about is it's just dishonest. I mean, this is an entirely different bill that you're talking about. This is SB 184. It's 2 pages long, and I would really encourage everybody in this room to read this bill, because this is not the bill that Tim's talking about. There was a bill later that I guess everybody could decide on, but this bill, this specific bill, you voted in favor of, and I'm glad it didn't pass. But Tim, you also
It's the law now,
yeah, not this bill right here.
but the content.
This specific bill, and I would encourage you to read it. But he voted on a bill that would limit the ability for the city of Albuquerque. So what Tim thinks is that Santa Fe should decide where sex offenders in this city should live, not the city of Albuquerque. That's exactly what this bill says. And so I would really encourage people to read this bill that you voted for, Tim. It's dangerous. This is a dangerous bill. It's just downright disgusting.
Lots of hands now. If it's a quick comment, because we're going to get this question from this lady here.
Okay, what I thought was, what I thought I heard, and clarify this for me, please, if I'm wrong, that Tim said that it is important to have it uniform statewide, and that's what we have now. So why are we wanting something specific to Albuquerque when there is something statewide?
That's a great point.
Do you want to respond to that, or?
Yeah, please.
So was that a yes?
It's up. I agree with you.
So real quick, then I promise we'll get back.
You know, I absolutely agree with you too. But I also, I mean, that's why I try to spend as little time as I can in Santa Fe, because what Tim said in this bill is that Santa Fe should decide that the city of Albuquerque shouldn't decide
That's just 'cause
where sex offenders could live, and so that's exactly what this bill says, and it limits that opportunity. So I definitely want to encourage you to read the bill. I have a copy of it, and my guess is if you haven't read it, then I would encourage you to read it. The bottom line is that it's just dishonest, and how Tim's explained it is just downright dishonest. And it's what makes people so cynical of politicians.